Yes, here we go. It is the Monday Club. Welcome aboard the bus. 7 o'clock on a Monday. It's not been the best Monday. Let's be honest. As the fallout from more drop points, dreadful transfer window. It's been a tricky week. Let's just tell the truth. It's been a tricky week if you're a Celtic fan, and it shows no sign of getting any easier as we travel Easter Road Wednesday. At that point, it could be level-headed, level pegging in the league and all that carry on as well, which is crazy when you consider that 8-point cushion that we had not so long ago. Don't worry, the guy beside me, Big John, he's not going to be doing any of the opening gambits this week. Right? We're like, fuck that. Sometimes it's not always the best therapy. But Jonathan and I, it was crap at the weekend, wasn't it? We'll get stuck into it all. We'll do all that good stuff. But how are you anyway? All right?
Yeah, I'm not bad, thanks. Not bad. And trying to keep a wee bit of a distance from the football. It's been a bit frustrating the last couple of days, to say the least. It's one of those ones where, second half it was just I don't know what was going on that second half. That first half was fine, and then the second half it just all fell apart. But I'm sure we'll get into it as the show goes on.
Yeah, exactly. First half was fine. I mean, I think that's what kind of we clutch at now. Do you know what I mean? You did a fine. It was a fine first half. Do you know what I mean? Which is that's the definition of like a really good first half for us this season. Such has been the up and down nature of the performances and all that good stuff means give us a wee like, give us a share. We've had crazy numbers over the weekend. People will watch the bus when they're looking for some honesty, I suppose. They happy clapping on here, but we're open to all points of view on the bus as well, and we'll tackle loads of your comments that come in as well. So do make sure you hit that thumbs up, thumbs down, so we can get as many different viewpoints as possible. Remember, you can become a Bhoycie Bus member as well. $1.99 a month is completely optional. There's loads out there. We can't thank you enough. The likes of Gary Brown, D-Mac, Jim C, Martin K, Mr. A, a new member, all that carry on. Thanks very much for that. And it's 12.5% discounts at piesports.com when you use the code BUS1888. It's a tough one to approach when you don't want to just keep on repeating yourself, Jonathan. I think there's definitely more fans now than there was this time last week, shall we say, that are accepting like there's a hell of a lot of shortcomings at Boardroom level now. That team needed strengthened. But if we have a look at our rivals, whatever shortcomings they might have in terms of expendable revenue, they certainly at least try and use as much of it as they possibly can to strengthen their ranks. No one can say the Celtic have done that in the January window, despite, of course, it all being signposted that they would. And I also think more heads are turning towards the manager's situation. I think we can have a wee sort of better chat about that, though, when you think about it. Like, my point of view on the manager changing is, I still think it might be in the best interest to make that change now. And what I also think is, if you're not going to back the one that's currently there, which the board haven't, then the last bit of power that they've got to try and influence the title race would be making a change at managerial level. If they, for loads of different reasons, what they're watching on the park can't impress them, let alone us, let alone Brendan himself. Why can't he get a tune? Why can the football not be played at a slightly higher energy level than what we see? Who knows? If you don't want to back him in the transfer window, which clearly they don't, there's no point in being there either. And like I say, if you want to actually do something that remotely looks like you give a shit about winning this league title and make some sort of change that can affect an outcome, then that's the only one that's kind of left with them. I think the flip side of that debate is, where do they go from there? Do they stick John Kennedy in? Do they go for another unimaginative appointment? Do they get Gordon Strachan? None of this would surprise me, by the way. Let's just be clear. It might sound like I'm having a laugh. Wouldn't surprise me if Rodgers wasn't in situ. They would ask someone like Strachan to take over to the end of the season. There's about 15 of them there already. I mean, I jest, but it's kind of the approach that they take. That's the poisoned chalice aspect of if the manager went to be there, is these Muppets in charge, who they bring in, could be even more of a yes man. Could just be more nepotism United sort of scenes that we see. But there's a hell of a lot to chew over. Jonathan, where are you at with all that?
It's a tricky one. I mean, I think, there's blame to go around for everyone. There's no two ways about it after what we witnessed at the weekend and what we've witnessed really all season, is that the performances on the park have been few and far between that have been good enough in the league. We're getting away with it in the first spell of the season when we managed to put together that run of results, and we're obviously helped by the fact Rangers were dropping points. Rangers are no longer dropping points, and we are now shipping them left, right and centre, unfortunately. If you're starting with the board, then you look at what we ended up finishing with the back four on Saturday, and you realise just how much of a stripping exercise there has been at the club in terms of not bringing in the required players, and that's just looking at the back line, but you could really go anywhere across the park. What I will say is, from the glimpses we've seen of Kuhn, I thought he looked decent. Not perhaps the most imaginative of signings, but certainly decent. He did okay as well when he came on, but let's not make two ways about it. There's been massive failings in both windows this season, and we had a real opportunity after beating Rangers right before the January window opened to really make a statement in January, to make it very clear that we were going to strengthen and take advantage of the position we were in the league at that point. The fact we had some momentum, it was crying out for us to kick on. And what have we done as a club? We've slammed the brakes once again, and it's not good enough on that front. Going to the manager, though, I don't think he can be exempt from criticism whatsoever. The performances there, as I say, they haven't been very, very strong. I didn't feel the club or the squad had an answer when Aberdeen mixed it up in that second half. I thought Aberdeen were by far the better team for large spells in that second half, and Celtic couldn't get to grips with them after they started getting in our faces, and that's pretty damning in of itself, that Brendan wasn't able to find a way to turn that around. And it's just not like what we were expecting from Brendan Rodgers when he comes in, because his in-game management was one of the things we were all really excited to have back at the club.
That's a brilliant point. That's a brilliant point, yeah.
But his in-game management didn't seem to be there at all against Aberdeen. When we went 1-0 down, I was convinced the best we were going to get out of that was a point at that point. And, I was already at that stage when I went to 1-0. I was like, if we get a draw out of this, we've probably done about as good as we're going to get once we went 1-0 down. And that's never a good sign as a Celtic fan, if you're looking at games like that and thinking, Christ, the draw here might be about as good as we can manage in any domestic league game outside of, potentially a trip to Ibrox. So there's a lot of question marks over him, and he needs to find a way to get the best out of the players he has, because yes, the windows haven't been good enough, but the players there should be good enough to beat most of the teams in the league. I don't think that Rangers team that we're looking at is a particularly brilliant team, but what they are doing extremely well is beating the other teams in the league and finding ways to win games. And what I think Celtic are really struggling with is finding a way to win games at the moment, and that's on Brendan, because Brendan has the tools there, even with the players he has, to find ways to win these matches, or at least change things in game that we know he's capable of doing because he's done it before. And he just doesn't seem able to find that formula. And fans are rightfully getting a bit pissed off with him now. And I think you're looking at it as well. And a lot of his comments in the press have probably been a bit misleading. You've had November, I'm saying he wants more players in, we desperately need quality, and then he's kind of flipped his stance in January to saying he's more of a development coach and he'll work with the players he has, and that's more his area of expertise anyway. And it just, for me, the message needs to be consistent from the manager, but he also is going to need to mix things up, because what he's been trying this season, for whatever reason, is not working with the players he has at his disposal. He's not getting new ones from the board, so he has to really have a good long look at himself, because his not just his job that's on the line, his reputation as a manager is on the line. If he comes into Celtic and loses the league this season, then he's going to be really, up against it in terms of finding another level of club that he would aspire to be at post his time at Celtic this time around, because this would be quite damning for me on his reputation if he was to lose this league, which for me is now very much open and could go either way at this stage. I just don't think there's much in it. I think Celtic have a better squad than Rangers, but I just don't trust us anymore to win the other games, and that's another damning tale of where we're at just now.
It's weird, because we went into the game against Aberdeen, I thought, in a backdrop of noise, frustration, I mean, many other words you could use to describe the ending of the window. Um, I mean, is it really that big a surprise that we dropped points at Bhoycie? This is not me trying to put spin on it. It's just a genuine question. I don't think it was, right. I think when you look at all the way the mood music was being played, I think there that when you actually look back, it was probably silly not to put a fair chunk of change. Please gamble responsibly and all it, but a fair chunk of change on Celtic dropping points at Bustalgia. I don't think anyone could be surprised. But what you find is, before that, we'd won 6 in a row domestic. That was the most, that's the longest consecutive winning matches we'd had put together this season. Yeah, at one point prior to that, we had an 8-point gap at the top, and it's very, very weird. I think, like, when I look at what's happened is with Rodgers and the 2 windows and the team, I think when you combine all the factors, every one of them has been underwhelming for various reasons. The 2 windows have been because we've seen quality leave the team. We've seen Starfelt, Jota, Moy, not bothered. And who was the other one? Jeez, so I'm saying these names so often. Hatati get injured, so that was it. But in terms of departing for fees, we've seen Starfelt and Jota go, and we've seen an array of players come in, none that fans had heard of. I get that shouldn't be the blueprint to go, or the green print, to go and sign a player for Celtic, right? I get that. But I think sometimes just something like that, a wee chink that, we look like we're going in the right direction, because when it's back to the bargain basins, we view our own players like Jota as premium, sort of Marks and Spencer's prices, £25 million, but we only value replacing them when we go back to the bottom rung of the ladder in terms of fees, investment, things like this overall. And none of them really have cut it. None. Let's be honest. Palmer's now might be a first team regular, but just a name. I don't think he's cut it as such overall, albeit I'm still got a wee tiny bit of hope for him, if that's anything. Call it that.
He'll be dropped out of the team though now, Russell, as well, won't he? Because Maeda's now back, so I think he'll probably drop out.
Yeah, which, is damn. He was probably your marquee signing, would we call the summer. So that was an underwhelming window for that. January was underwhelming. We just discussed it all last week and over the last couple of weeks when we knew what way it was headed. I look at the manager's demeanour in interviews, various occasions this season, and I found them underwhelming. I remember saying when we drew, do you remember when it was St Johnstone, I'm sure, at home?
Yeah, right at the start of the season, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I remember I'd posted something on the lines of, this guy looks a wee bit lost, standing there, a bit lonely, a bit lost, and like he's struggling to find his poise. That's just how his whole demeanour is, again, underwhelming. Terry spoke on the PMPs on various occasions about the manager, with his hands in his pockets on the side, not as active with the old notepad as what he was maybe in his first spell here. He's cut an underwhelming figure on the whole, in my opinion, since he's came back in, particularly because when we weren't looking for all that much devilment from him last time around, we learnt our lessons and we realised what terminados meant. We realised what a million winger comments made that he done last time. And I thought with hindsight, a lot of fans, some still called him the rat. It's their gift to do that. That's fine. I was very much on the, do you know what, looking back, I think he was trying to signpost that I'm not happy about how things are going. So I was quite, I wish I'd been more acutely aware of these things happening then. Now, what's actually happened is this time around, I think a lot of fans have been looking for him to be like that again. I think fans have been going, call these bastards out. If you're not happy with it, let us know. And I think it's been a fatal mistake by him, or what will lead to being the fatal mistake by him, is not being concise, direct enough to tell the media, like he did last time, that I ain't happy with what that's getting done. And it also would have helped him out with his self-preservation cause that he seems to be on right now as well. Instead, it looks like he's turned his attention to the boos. He's tried to deflect those and sort of suggested fans boo anything. But at least there was a wee bit of life in him then. I think a lot of this season, he's been underwhelming. Then we get to the performances on the park. And there's no two ways in my mind. They've been really, really underwhelming. There's been just wee bursts every now and then where we thought, fucking hell, we look good there. You know, where we've blown teams away in sort of early spells. Away to St Mirren a few weeks ago, or well, before Christmas.
Couple up at 5 minutes.
Very good. There's the 6-0 home win that we've had. Obviously beating Rangers twice. But again, these have been moments, not consistent runs. Even when we win 6 games in a row, look at that spell and tell me if any time during that you thought, wow, the wheels are really in motion here. This Celtic team's cooking with gas. There's been moments. That's it. The team's been underwhelming. And I just think when you combine all of this, from a manager's demeanour to a bold unwilling to invest in the playing product, to the way the team sets up itself and their performances on the pitch, all being like that, I think there's a lot of Celtic fans that will be looking at it and going, doesn't bode well for what comes at the end of the season. Something needs to change. And what the board have done, and I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist whatsoever, what they've done very cleverly is they've managed to get every single eye to point towards the manager. And they can, at any point, it might cost money, but they won't care about that if it suits them. They could pull the trigger on his reign, and he is basically thrown under the bus, if you like, for that. He looks like he's responsible for it all, and they will look great, in their wee eyes, if we were to get someone in that could go on and win it. But it's actually the last card that they can play. See, just everything I've said there, it does kind of have you sighing a wee bit, Jonathan, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's definitely signs that this season has taken a seriously bad turn for the worse, and I don't think it's going to get any better in the immediate future. The only way that's going to improve is if performances on the park start to pick up and the results go with it, because that's the only way we can turn this around. And that, unfortunately, now is all at the manager and players' door. There's nothing more we can do in terms of the board at this moment in time. Of course, we can look back, and we shouldn't forget what has happened in the windows that have been and gone. But in terms of what happens between now and May, that's now all on to the players that we do have in the building and on to Brendan Rodgers to try and get a tune out of them. Because for me, as I keep saying, I just think Brendan hasn't really been able to do that as much as I would have liked with this squad of players, because he's not inherited a bad squad. I know it's been weakened slightly, and probably more so than slightly. That's probably doing him a disservice, but it has been weakened and not strengthened the way it should have been. But there's still a core element of those players that have been over the line many times in the past. He's still got a very strong squad there for domestic football, yet he still finds himself in a position where he had an 8-point lead, and he might no longer have that 8-point lead come close of play tomorrow night when Rangers take on Aberdeen. And he's got to be asking himself questions as to how he's let that happen as a football coach as well. If he's turning around and this is what his latest rantings have been, is that he's here to develop the players he has and he's happy with that, then Brendan's going to have a look at himself and think, well, if this is what I'm quite happy to deal with, if he's telling the truth on that part and he's quite happy working with whatever he's given to work with, he's got to then ask himself, why am I not getting the best out of these players? Because, plenty of them have been underwhelming. It's been your word of choice tonight, and plenty of them have been underwhelming this season. I mean, I'll touch on another point with the Aberdeen game. I always think for us, a lot of our play now goes through Matt O'Reilly playing well. I didn't think Matt O'Reilly had his best game on Saturday at all. And I feel that also contributed to the result, because we hang our hats now too heavily on one or two players, because too many of them aren't turning up anymore for us. In terms of the manager's future at the club, I don't think the board would pull the trigger on him during the season unless it goes horrendous. I think the league would be lost before they'll pull the trigger. I just think the board wouldn't have the balls to do it earlier on than that, even if it was crying out to happen. And I'm going to base that on the COVID year, that they wouldn't get rid of Lenny until the league was long gone. And I suspect they would do the same with Brendan Rodgers, as they would not get rid of him until the league was long gone if it did go down that route. My gut tells me it'll probably go to the wire, and I think it'll be very close between the two clubs. I think we'll still get enough wins to stay in the race, if you like, but whether it's going to be enough to win it, I'm not so sure. And I'm quite surprised I'm having even that conversation, because if you'd asked me that a couple of months ago, I would have been thinking Celtic are going to win this fairly comfortably, and you would have been looking more towards what happens with the Scottish Cup, whereas now all focus is on the league. And make no mistake about it, if Celtic don't win the league, Brendan Rodgers, Jotas are given out to him. But the problem you have there, Russell, is that you'll change the manager, but none in the boardroom will change. Nothing will change upstairs, regardless of what happens over the next couple of months. All those people that are still on the board will still be there next year. The only question mark at Celtic is really whether Brendan Rodgers will still be there next year. And I think more fans every passing day are leaning towards the fact he won't be the man in charge next season, even if he manages to win the league this year. There's a lot of speculation there that he might decide to call it and call it quits because he's maybe feeling he can't win these fans us back around, and he might feel he's not going to be getting the backing from the board to actually implement the vision he had when he first came in as well. So there's a lot of question marks there, but I think the one thing we do know for sure is that all the problems at Celtic will not go away purely by changing the manager unless it's going to be a complete overhaul of the club, and that's not going to happen. And it's frustrating because there's just so much that's not quite right just now, and we've totally made a mess of this season regardless for me of how it plays out. It's going to be one we're going to remember for a lot of mistakes that we've made.
But with that in mind, no one's expecting the whole board and all that to change between now and the end of the season. But to try and win the league, you think even then they would still rather it just became out of sight before they were to change the manager.
They've got previous for it.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. But show me someone who doesn't learn from their mistakes, and I'll show you an idiot. It's one of those things. But I suppose we're already in the boat that we think a lot of them are that anyway. See, when I look at the points that he's thrown away, someone said in the chat that, at one point, were we 13 clear at one point with games in hand? No, us with games in hand. They had games in hand. Could be something like that. But what we're seeing anyway, in terms of the drop-off, yes, we can point our fingers at the board, and we do. Trust me, especially on this bus. Keep your eyes on them at all times. I've been trying to say it for years. And, not just when the team might look a wee bit shite, keep your eye on them all the time because they're always pulling fast ones left, right, and centre. You learn that with this lot. But if we were to put that to one side, I think you then compare it to when Lenny was up against McCoist. If you remember, one of the things that really pisses us fans off is this narrative. They went to administration and suddenly the league crumbled. In actual fact, that 15-point deficit had been turned round by Lennon by the new year, even though in October it was as high as 15 points at one stage. Now, we look at that as at the failings purely of McCoist and enjoyed every single bit of being able to rip him for it, and never at any point allowed them to hide behind it. Oh, we went in administration crap. We'd already turned the tables around by that point. And that's kind of like the size of points drop-off we've done here, bearing in mind, the financial advantages we do have and the fact we've beaten them twice this year. It's been all these drop points in games that they just didn't need to happen. We've got to be consistent and say, that's on our manager as well, no?
Yeah, no, we definitely do. And you can reel off some of them. I mean, Bustalgia, to be fair, if you're looking at the start of the season, you can almost account for drop points at Aberdeen, even though it doesn't happen very often. Aberdeen is a difficult place to go notoriously, so it's not a great shock if you do end up dropping points up north. But what you can't legislate for this season was, there's 2 points at Johnson at home, there's 2 points at Motherwell at home, lost to Hearts at home. It's actually been the home games where more of the points have been dropped, unbelievably, for Celtic, because we had that really difficult first round of fixtures. If you remember, we were all expecting probably us to drop more points than we actually did in those away games to begin with. But then, we got that run of home games and we're expecting to then go ahead and stretch our lead. And it was actually in that run of home games is where all of our problems really started to kick in terms of results. So there's absolutely no two ways about it. If you're looking at it like that, Celtic have to look at themselves, and Brendan Rodgers has to look at himself and think, how have I got into a position where I had an 8-point lead and, I played the bulk of the trickier away ties in the first round of fixtures when he built up this 8-point lead, and then he's ended up with us potentially being back on a level footing with Rangers, in February now with 2 derbies to play, and he's won both of the previous 2.
Well, let's look at it as well. Do you remember after the first round of fixtures, if you want to look at it that way, we said everywhere Rangers turn there's a slamming door because
Yep.
they're now about to have the trickier fixtures, and it's been mostly for the trickier ones that they've actually clawed this gap back, and they've took a defeat on the chin from us as well. They've got 7 out of the next 10 games, I think it is, at home, or maybe that was including at the weekend. I don't pay that much attention. I just heard that stat, thought I would use it. But something like that. 7 out of 10 at home after the points gap being essentially wiped. They're in the driving seat now in terms of how they'll see getting maximum points in this race will go for them. They've got the perfect opportunity now with that, and it does favour them. I wonder if maybe for Celtic's point of view, you could make an argument that favours us to be away from home. That's not the fans' fault, but I just wonder if there is an argument to say that it will. And then take it, whatever happens after the split happens. It's very, very interesting. There was a great point that came in earlier on, and it was by a George Barr. I've never seen your name on the bus before. Welcome aboard, George. Hope you're good, mate. And he's saying we are 7 points behind the Huns last 15 games. We're even behind Hearts in the last 15 games.
Yeah, that's a point more than us in the last 15.
I hadn't seen this stat. Yeah. I mean, that's terrible form then that you're in when you're third best over the last 15. My issues with recruitment. I think it's ridiculous any manager takes a job but they can't bring in their own staff as a day one sort of measure, not we've seen his coach for Leicester join mid-January or whenever it was. I just think, take all that aside, still you have the best squad available. You're on the highest paid Celtic manager of all time. Go get me better than third place on a 15-game run. 15's a sizable chunk of evidence to look at as well. Let's be real here. This isn't just twisting stats to try and sort of favour or, disregard Brendan in any way, shape or form. 15 games is a good body of evidence to look at. That includes games against both Rangers and Hearts as well. And, to be third in that, that's just a side just nowhere near good enough to win the league.
Yeah, if that form continues over the next 15, then you can forget about it. And that's pretty much the harsh reality. If you're looking at 15 games, that's almost, half a season there of evidence that suggests Celtic are not measuring up anywhere close to where they've been the last couple of years, or indeed really this millennium. They've not had many seasons like that where they'd be, third in the form charts. And any 15-game run you want to pick from the 2000s onwards, Celtic have generally either always been first or second. So to be behind Hearts there does get the alarm bells ringing even more as to what's actually going on at the club just now. And as I say, it's a collective. There's absolutely no doubt about it. There's nobody that's coming out of this looking great from my point of view at all. I think you've got to look at it. And whilst the windows weren't great by any stretch of the imagination, you're looking at it now and thinking, well, we've made this hard for ourselves on the pitch when we've had that lead. We've shot ourselves in the foot with some ridiculous drop points along the way. That the backlash is now there with the fans, which is now making Celtic Park a harder environment to go and play your football in than just now, because you're probably not going to get the same levels of support as you were at the start of the season, or the fans will turn a bit quicker because there is so much frustration around the club just now, which you can't blame the fans for either, by the way. And it's just got all the makings of being a bit poisonous going forward this season if the results aren't there, Russell, because you're looking at it's Hibs on Wednesday, Easter Road, place I don't think Brendan Rodgers has won at. Certainly it's not one that he's got a good record at, Easter Road, this season, not just this season but across his whole tenure both times at Celtic. You got St Mirren away in the Cup at the weekend coming up as well. If those two results do not go the way that we need them to go, Celtic then play Kilmarnock at home the following week, and that'll be an absolute powder keg of an atmosphere going into that game at Celtic Park. I mean, it's already, I think, going to be pretty tense, that game, regardless of how the next two pan out. But if Celtic do not win both of those next two games, I expect Celtic Park to be a very difficult place for Celtic to be actually playing at the moment, just because there is so much frustration that is boiling over because of so many mistakes that have been made at both boardroom level, at management level, even at the players' levels, I think they need to have a look at themselves as well and wonder if they are actually all applying themselves as well as they could. But make no mistake about it, the one who's on the chopping block here is Brendan Rodgers, because to be paying that type of money on a manager and getting those type of results, you're just not going to last very long at Celtic. Not when you're getting paid that much money. You cannot be putting together strings of results like that.
Well, the irony being, though, of course, because he's on that sort of money, would lead to that much of a payoff that you might get away with it a wee bit longer. Do you know what I mean? I wonder.
Well, I think that'd be another reason why they wouldn't want to pull the trigger on him. 100%. There would be a fair financial payoff to give him, and I can't see Brendan walking in the middle of the season, potentially at the end, once it's all said and done. But certainly he won't walk out, I don't think, during the season this time round.
Well, of course. I mean, he's not going to make that mistake again. He'll show that he was true to his word. I mean, I've got whatever sympathy I had for him. I just feel evaporated when he said the comment he did about the booze. For me, I just think, what are you doing? That was where he had an opportunity and a chance to shine a light for the fans on what his grievances are. Because see, right now, if you actually listen to everything Brendan says, he's kind of happy with everything, how it's all going. He doesn't really get the booing. He just thinks he gets booed because he's Brendan Rodgers, and the board get booed because of the board. He likes to develop players. He's happy with the recruitment team. And it's just like, well, wait the fucking now, mate. I want to see a wee bit more cheesed off how things are going. But my worry there would be that we'd end up aiming that at the players themselves, which, by the way, don't escape criticism. And I think, to be honest with you, have so far in the 30-odd minutes that we've been on, Jonathan, because you go through that team, and I just worry that some of them right now are going through something I might do a slightly more detailed show on, but I call it the Ange Postecoglou effect. It's like the Nelson Mandela effect, where we dress up everything to be far better than it was under Ange than what it actually was. Now, there was displays, particularly second half of last season, that mirrored a lot of ours this season, in my opinion. I thought players' form did fall away. I thought we did think some players that had been maybe put on pedestals, we were sort of looking at and going, maybe they're not quite as good as what we thought. There was times where Postecoglou himself did Brendan Rodgers things. You'll be surprised how long I'm here. If that was Rodgers who'd said something like that, fucking hell, and then leaves anyway. But it's like the Mandela effect, you know what I mean? Where it's like, you look back at that time and it's almost like the players are now looking at it with dewy eyes as well. And whoever came in next was never going to quite be Ange. And none of them have quite believed it. Yeah, I don't think it could have been anyone, but, I'm not trying to excuse Rodgers of the blame here. We're just looking at a different angle here. And it's almost like, whoever it was that came in, whatever the message was, well, it was still going to be the same as the Ange ball. And I think the fans felt like that. It's like, it's just not exciting enough. It's not electric enough. This is just, we're not playing 100 miles an hour. We didn't all the time under Ange Postecoglou. And many Spurs fans are seeing that as well now, by the way. If you listen to them, not everything's this crazy rock and roll football that it's made out to be. But when it is having its moments, then fucking hell, yeah, absolutely. And these tend to become your memories of it. But I also think the players, Jonathan, they've got to accept they get paid tens of thousands of pounds to play for one of the biggest football clubs in the fucking world. They ain't hard done by. Your job's to listen to whoever it fucking is with a shirt and tie on, whoever it is with their initials on their big puffer jacket on a cold December morning at training who tells you what to do. Your job's to listen and do it. If he doesn't really inspire them, find other ways to be inspired. The best players that have ever played found it within themselves, their own personal pride, their own respect, and the respect for the club that they played for. None are bigger aspects of that in terms of emotional pull than Celtic, and yet we're not really seeing much emotional pull all the time. We're not seeing a team that seems completely invested in. Let's say Rodgers a prick and they'll hate him. How many of them are playing for the badge? How many of them are sitting there going, we need to get out of this? How many of them are showing that, let alone their own personal pride? And I think that's to be a bit of a wake-up call there to, just because Postecoglou leaves doesn't mean whoever next comes in, you just don't play for. Get a grip. And if that is the way they're going to be, because at times, as we've just spoke about, the amount of displays we've seen this season, I think we can't accept that Brendan Rodgers has been telling them to go, yep, just want you to play at 2 miles an hour, please, today. Don't run, don't do anything. Just play sideways ball and hopefully put other fans to sleep and maybe win 1-0. I mean, I think they've took whatever message he's given and they've went almost so far the other way. I think their investment in a manager will probably lead them as they go forward in their careers to learn not to do it quite as much again. Because I think in that aspect, the players so far, I mean, a lot of them have a lot to answer to. And a lot of them might be feeling right now a wee bit exposed that they ain't quite as good as what they were made out to be. They all weren't quite these £20 million superstars that they were. And, the image of them was such, again, was the Ange Postecoglou effect that was going on at Celtic at that time.
There's definitely been a drop off a lot of players this season. I think you do have to look at some of them and think this can't just be because of a managerial change that's caused this. You've got to be willing to actually play for the jersey a bit more. One that sticks out to me is I think Alistair Johnson's form, for example, has fallen off a cliff this year. A lot of people, and myself included, thought he was a bit of an upgrade to begin with on Juranovic, whereas now I would honestly say I'd rather have Tony Ralston in the first team ahead of him, which tells you how much he's fallen off. And that's just one example I can think of off the top of my head. But you could go through the team, Russell, and there's very few players that you could say have really upped their performance levels this season from where they were last. Most have regressed, which is you're either on two sides of that. You're either saying that's because Brendan Rodgers has tried to get them to play a certain style, and that's on Rodgers to get the best out of them, or you turn around and you flip the argument and say the players should be good enough because they've proven it over the years at Celtic, a lot of these players, that they should be able to adapt to the system and should be able to show a bit more with what Brendan Rodgers is actually asking them to do. And you are seeing that there is instances, Matt O'Reilly being the main one that has came on leaps and bounds this year.
The only one.
But the only one.
The only one.
Argue, as I say, the only other one you can make the case for is Liam Scales, but he wasn't even in the building last season. So outside of that, you really are looking at it and you're having to ask questions. Is it the players that are just not giving it their all this time around? Are they lacking the same belief? Are they suffering some sort of hangover to the fact the manager has changed, which could be evident in one or two of them?
I think so big time. I think so big time throughout the squad.
I think there's definitely a case to make on that, certainly with some players' performances. I think one exception to that, and the one that I do pin on Rodgers, is Kyogo. I think Kyogo hasn't been utilised as well by Brendan. Again, I felt he was pretty anonymous on Saturday. I thought he actually was a bit more in the game once Ida comes on, who looked, as I say, okay in terms of holding the ball up. But I feel Kyogo's role has changed. He's plays a bit more deep under Brendan, and it's not working. It's not really giving them the balls. When the balls are getting played across, he's not always there on the end of them like he was under Postecoglou. We don't get as many of those goals for those notorious back post runs that we were getting the year before that was happening under Ange Postecoglou. I'm not saying that's all Brendan's fault, but if I was putting one player that I would probably say certainly has regressed that I think is Rodgers' fault, I think it's certainly Kyogo. But outside of that, I would turn around and say a lot of the other players have a lot to answer for with their performances, this season as well, and they have to take their share of the responsibility.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're saying that.
They're getting a free pass at the moment because you either seems like at the moment most of the fans are either one way of thinking or another, which is either they're blaming the board for how the windows have went, or they're blaming the manager because perhaps for a lot of them it wasn't who they wanted in to begin with, and because there was a lot of controversy around going back to Rodgers. And based on the performances on the park, and the way Brendan Rodgers is trying to set the teams up, the players are almost getting a free pass and they're all just saying it's only because of Brendan that happens. And I don't think that's necessarily true either. I think the players have to take their share of responsibility. And what I'd like to see more of, Russell, and, Terry bangs on about it as well a lot, is Cal McGregor as a captain. I think needs to lead a bit more in these sort of times as well, because he is somebody that does want to play for the jersey. And he's somebody that I would imagine would have quite happy to have had Brendan Rodgers back, considering how much of an impact Rodgers had on him the first time around And I feel like, even the captain could possibly be doing more to lift these players and get them through games. And perhaps there's question marks there as well, because at the moment, there's just questions everywhere at this football club, but not a lot of answers.
Well, I think that's a good point as well. I mean, see, the thing is, if it is all the manager, again, please don't think this is a big defensive of Brendan. I've made my feelings pretty clear on it over the last couple of shows that we've done. That I think maybe the best option for Celtic to try and salvage this league might be making that change, because they can't really make any other changes that can affect the outcome of the title between now and the end of the season, other than changing the manager. I think that might be the best option. I'm just trying to give a wee bit of balance here and look at other aspects of it as well. The board have had it tight off me the whole time. Jonathan just disappearing there and coming back.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So did you?
Thanks for that, mate. I thought you were off. I was like, fucking hell, put everyone to tears. There is 263 of you still in the bus, though, so a big thank you for that. Remember, give us a wee like or a dislike. I don't really care. It helps all that. Algorithm. Ask Phil all about that. He'll tell you the next time he's on. I've not got a clue. But Jonathan, when it comes to the funny or the strange, the curious, if you like, case of our talismanic striker, Kyogo. Talk to me about this. Yesterday we had 22 efforts on goal away from home against Aberdeen. Ange does that and you're buzzing, mate. See, free-flowing football. Opportunities getting created all the time, even away from home. Even when we're not in the greatest of form and we're third in the third in the table of the last 15 games. 22 efforts away. What's the problem here? Only 4 were on target. 4. It's just bizarre, because I don't know what's happened with this John Duncan. By the way, I mean he's writing a million comments after every show. He's in here saying, "When we win the Scottish Cup, you better not say any different. Support your club, stop your crying." I think John's just got a new laptop or something for Christmas because he's typing everywhere. I woke up to about 4,000 notifications. They were all John Duncan. I get it, mate. You're all positive in the garden. That's great. I don't know why you put yourself through having to listen to those miserable bastards, mate, but crack on. But yeah, I mean, we appreciate it. But I mean, I think when it comes to Kyogo there, if we're having 22 shots on goal, how is it he's been so, not treated? You say it's on the manager, you think, with the case of Kyogo. Well, how's he not getting involved when the team's having 22 shots at goal? How's that not on, a wee bit impetus on the best goal scorer at the club to be getting involved in with such attacking displays? Do you know what I mean? Surely he should be involved in all that. Surely he's got to be. And I think at times even his touches look poor. I think he has looked off it. And I don't know. I mean, I think he's got to take responsibility for his own performances as well. Is basically what I'm trying to say in a nutshell. The guy's he's 29-year-old striker. But you can't expect the same style of play under every manager. You wouldn't have played under the same style of play under managers previous. He's played in the left wing before. He's got to look at himself not getting the Japan squad as well. I mean, do you blame that on Rodgers too? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think, don't get me wrong, is the style of play that we're or the setup getting the maximum? Ever going to get the best Kyogo? Probably not. Do you think Kyogo could have done more though? I think you've got to have a real conversation about that and say, I expect if you hang your hat on the captain and you want to go, I need you to sort of roll the sleeves up and drive this a bit. I expect, one of our top earners who signed a new deal, who's been our top scorer the last 2 seasons, I want him to step up as well. I know we did against Rangers, but I want him to do it consistently. He must have scored. I'm not a stats man. I wonder if he's if he scored 3 goals in the last 15, something like that. 3 goals in the last 16, 17. Someone can correct me. It must be like that though. That's damning Jonathan on who's your highest paid striker, who's at the peak years of his career and who's came up trumps so many times in the last 2 seasons, for him not to be able to do it the one season where it is a bit tighter and we are up against it a bit more.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at it, he's not only our highest paid striker, he's our only striker that we can hang our hats on with any real faith as well, which again goes back to recruitment, but we've already touched upon that a lot. When you're looking at Kyogo, he is a bit of a victim of the system, but I take your point. He could certainly be doing more with his opportunities that he's getting under Brendan. the goal return from him is unbelievably low, not something anyone would have foreseen going into this season whatsoever. He does have flashes and moments going on, Russell, but the situation there is, even at Pittodrie, he does have a moment where he actually goes past about 3 or 4 players, and you think he's actually about to score an absolute peach, and then the shot gets blocked down. So he does have his moments, but he's just not consistently been able to find any sort of level of form to what he had previously under Ange Postecoglou. And I don't know, again, Kyogo is probably another one that does suffer a little bit from the Ange Postecoglou hangover, if you like, because Kyogo is Ange's boy, absolutely. Even when we had Giakoumakis, another proven striker who a lot of the time we were crying out to be playing, alongside Kyogo or even ahead of Kyogo at times, Ange Postecoglou always stuck with his man. And I think that's another point you do have to look at as well, in fairness, is Kyogo doesn't really have anyone pushing him for that jersey. Obviously, Ida might come in and do that now, but when your next player in the pecking order is Kyogo's position is always pretty safe. And I do wonder if that's also played an impact on his performances there, is because he doesn't have somebody chomping at the bit that could potentially replace him like he did have with the Giakoumakis previously under Ange Postecoglou. Kyogo is probably, even when he's not in form at the moment, Russell, he's still going to be one of your first names on your team sheet, rightly or wrongly, because you're not going to want to have went to previously. As I say, it might change now with Ida. I don't think so. Personally, I would imagine he's going to be more a bench player as well. But I do think, even if we're looking at it, it might be time to change the system. It might be time to try something different, because we keep going back to it. And the players aren't getting the best of the players how we're playing just now. Kyogo being one example. Perhaps if Rodgers tried something different with them, he might get more of a tune out of them, change the formation. He's got the abilities to do that. He could look at playing the both of them up front. I thought, Ida and Kyogo could link up well based on what I'd seen briefly at Pittodrie. There was a lot more direct play, if you remember, Russell, on Saturday once Ida comes on, which is a little bit more different from what Brendan Rodgers normally plays. And I just wonder if that's something he's going to deploy a bit more of, which will be far away from the sort of football that he normally goes after at Celtic. But it might just be a case he's going to need to mix it up. And it might need to be a case that until the end of this season, he's just got to find ways to win. And if it needs to be ugly football at times to get the job done, and that's the best way he can manage it, then that's what it's going to need to be now at this moment in time. But I do think there is an argument there that Ida and Kyogo could form a partnership up front. It's just a question of whether or not Rodgers wants to pull the trigger on that, because there's so many other inconsistent players. I'd be tempted to try something different at the very least.
Yeah, something different. Is that going to be, though, what Brendan wants to do? Or are they going to, as they go down on what did they say? Fall on their shield, and he'll just carry on with the current tactics. Anyway, normally going to sudden death at this time. We're going to drop the old sudden death quiz this week as well. Hopefully we'll have more to smile about. We usually like to have a laugh on a Monday. Usually it's at the other lot's expense. It's been a bit of a fall from, the normal good vibes, good moods, no opening gambit, no sudden death. Jeez, so we better win on Wednesday.
Serious business. Serious business on Mondays now. It's business end of the season.
We better win. We better win on Wednesday. I swear to you, man, honestly. And hopefully Neil Warnock can go do a number for the Dons tomorrow night. Anyway, if they do, I don't know. No, we'll just wait till Easter Road before we even do anything. Right, okay, that'll do us for Monday, though. 286 live. Can't thank you all enough. The bus is getting bigger, and busier all the time. Do remember to hit that wee subscribe button, hit the wee bell for notifications when we go live. Remember, we're available audio-wise on all your platforms, like Spotify, iTunes, all that carry on. Thanks to using it on the Megaphone platform. Thanks to EPL Index for that. We're out of here. Have a great week, and keep your eyes on the board. And Brendan. And the players. See you.